Most EDW environments have a layer within their architecture that represents the source data in its raw structure as it sits in that particular data source. This is typically the data layer that consumes the most resources from the infrastructure that supports an enterprise's EDW assets. A more economical and efficient approach to managing this layer of the EDW architecture would be to move this layer in its entirety to the Hadoop platform. This provides a number of benefits around cost savings, elevated user experience in your EDW environment, as well as delivering an area where ad hoc analytics can occur against an enterprise's granular raw data. I'm now going to walk through a demo to demonstrate how quickly and seamlessly this solution can migrate an enterprise's staging layer into Hadoop. The first step is to create a data source connection within the application. This is essentially the connection string that would be leveraged to connect to the EDW staging layer. Here I'm going to show an example connection to a SQL Server instance where my EDW staging layer resides. Upon successful connection to this database instance, the metadata for all tables and views in this instance are migrated into the solution. Now I'll show an example of how a particular table is represented in the solution, which is branded as a dataset within the application. You'll notice you can see the schema, any relevant metadata, as well as some sample rows from the SQL Server object. Once the user has verified that all database objects have been imported successfully, I can now move into the area of the application where I will actually create all the assets needed to perform the migration from SQL Server into a Hive environment running in Hadoop. The first step is I select my data source connection on the left-hand pane, and this immediately exposes the objects available to me in the SQL Server staging layer. I then select which objects through a point-and-click experience that I would like to migrate to Hadoop. I then provide a schema for where I would like my objects in the Hive environment to reside, a table prefix for any objects that are created, as well as a strategy as to whether I'd like to overwrite or insert into existing objects. Once I have completed those selections, I then click the Run button. This will initiate the process where behind the scenes, all necessary assets are being automatically generated to support the migration process. I'll now navigate to the job screen where we can see that a new job has been created for each of the source tables that exist in my SQL Server staging instance. The process has also generated all of the necessary workflows and schedules as well. Lastly, upon completion of the asset creation, the application will then fire off the process, which will then run against my Hadoop cluster to build out our target schema in Hive. As you'll notice, the processes are now being executed against my Hadoop cluster to reach into the SQL Server instance and load these assets into my Hive instance. Now I can navigate back to the dataset screen within the application and actually view the output of one of the Hive objects that has been created and populated from SQL Server. Here you can see the same dataset representation as we saw previously, but now this object is actually residing in my Hive instance in my Hadoop platform. Lastly, I could also connect via a visualization tool like Tableau to actually start doing analysis against any of these particular objects. As you can see, this process is extremely simple as the solution does all the legwork on behalf of the user.